So, Jabin, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on from where you are joining. We are delighted to have you join us for Boston Study Group's flagship initiative of Ambedkar Lecture Series. ALS is dedicated to honoring the life and legacy of Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, a visionary leader, social reformer, and champion of equality and justice. I'm Sanjay Bhagat, and it is pleasure to be today's ALS moderator. To briefly tell about the BSG, the Boston Study Group is a non-profit organization based in New England, USA. We are an Ambedkarite organization dedicated to creating a just and equitable society. We organize study groups, caste awareness workshops, lecture series, and other social activities in the Boston area to support our mission. Our members include individuals, families, students, scholars, academics, and workers across all religions, caste, or nationality, and who share our vision of equality and upliftment. We focus on creating support structure and working with the students from historically marginalized background. We are inspired by the figures who have worked for human welfare, from Buddha to Sant Ravidas to Savitribai and Jyotirao Phule, Periyar, and Dr. Ambedkar. In commemoration of Dr. Ambedkar's invaluable contribution, Boston Study Group have curated a series of lectures that explore various aspects of his life, work, and ideology and discuss various issues of oppressed communities. Our esteemed speakers at Ambedkar Lecture Series dwell into topics such as caste annihilation, constitutional rights, gender equality, education, economic justice, and Dalit empowerment, shedding light on the relevance of the Dr. Ambedkar's teaching in today's context. Today we have Ashok Kumbamu with us, who will be speaking on dispossession for accumulation and the Adivasi anti-systemic struggles. Ashok Kumbamu is a sociologist and a biomedical ethics researcher whose work span multiple disciplines. His research dwells into critical global issues, including development and globalization, environmental politics, the politics of science and technology, the global agri-food system, medical education, and social movement. With a strong commitment to academic excellence, Ashok has published extensively in prestigious peer-reviewed journals and books, making significant contribution to his fields. Beyond research, he plays a vital role in scholarly publishing as an associate editor for the Health Communication and an editorial board member of Capitalism, Nature, Socialism. A very warm welcome, Ashokji. Ashok's speech will be around 30 to 45 minutes, followed by 30 minutes of question and answer sessions. So with this brief introduction, Ashokji, stage is all yours.
Okay, yeah. Thank you very much, Sanjay, for that introduction. First, I would like to thank the Boston Study Group for inviting me to speak at this forum, and to all of you who joined in this conversation. So when I was first asked to speak at this forum, the first thing that came to my mind was, the ongoing attacks on Adivasis. As a sociologist, I could speak many other pressing issues in the US or India, but I kept thinking about the Adivasi issue. I wonder myself why. I believe the answer lies in something that G.N. Sai Baba said in one of his last interviews. In a Telugu interview, a journalist asked him, Sai, you were sentenced to life imprisonment for raising your voice against state oppression of Adivasis under this so-called operation, the Operation Green Hunt. Now that you have been acquitted, spending 10 years of life in prison, and now you're saying that you dedicate your life, rest of your life, to working for Adivasis. Why? Sai Baba's response was simple but very profound, which stuck with me forever. So his response was, if we think ourselves civilized, but don't talk about the Adivasis in crisis, then there is no meaning for our civilization. I think this civilizational challenge that is we need to take up, who we are and how do we perform ourselves, what is the purpose of life. This unpacks several aspects of civilization. This is where I'm to be honest, I'm not a scholar or expert on Adivasi issues, but I started learning after seeing these atrocities against Adivasis. I'm trying to understand what is the crisis, who is responsible, how can we be part of a solution, because we see what is happening in particularly in central India. So to understand this phenomenon, I'm trying to look at from the relationship between the state, capital, and Adivasi. So as Sanjay mentioned, next 30 to 45 minutes, I'll be talking about these issues in 3 segments. First, I would like to understand what is the nature of the Indian state? What is the character of Indian state? Can we call it a liberal state? Can we call it a neoliberal state? Or can we call it a Brahmanical Hindutva corporate state? Maybe some of us would call Brahmanical Hindutva fascist state. Or a combination of all of these. That is the first segment I would like to focus on. I'm here. I may take a little bit of detour, but I will come back to the crisis, Adivasi crisis. Then we talk about where are the Adivasis in crisis. To unpack that, we need to understand the political economy of development, the development that has been projected and presented to us. Then how the development is dispossessing the millions of Adivasis, Dalits, and other marginalized communities. Particularly in this case, how the development, how the state is bulldozing Adivasi communities in the name of development. Then, the third segment I would talk about, Adivasi resistance. Adivasis are not sitting idle. They are not just, taking orders from the state. They are resisting. How can we see this resistance? Why I call this anti-systemic struggle. So here, to understand the nature of the Indian state, whether it is liberal or not, I just wanted to give a little bit intro of what is liberalism, what classical liberalism tells about state-society relationship. I'm not going to take much of your time on this. I know this is very basic. I don't want to insult anyone here to talk about some of the basic stuff, because I just want to bring, I just wanted to be bring all of you on the same page. So classic liberalism, the first thing that comes to my mind is liberal individualism. Here, liberals say that as individuals, we are rational beings. We know we can make our choices based on reason. And we decide our own belief system. We decide our own values. We don't need any governmental or state intervention here. We need autonomy. That's where liberal individualism is coming about. Once we have this liberal individualism is secured, in order to secure that, we need to have a system, a political system that protects individual rights. For many liberal scholars, representative democracy is the best system that could protect individual rights, political rights, and freedoms. So when you have individual rights and you have freedom, obviously you can't expect a homogeneous society. People come up with diversified ideas, present diversified thoughts. So there will be a conflict in this. For pluralism, conflict is in continuous process. For liberalism, conflict is a part of a process. So, but liberalism also guarantees or facilitates at least a plural society. For example, a multicultural society. In the whole process, political liberalism talks about a social contract, a contract between individuals and the political system or the government. So here, the contract is, as an individual or as individuals, we sacrifice or we relinquish some of our rights, some of our freedoms, expecting that the state will reciprocate and state will guarantee these rights. For example, in Indian context, people relinquished or surrendered their arms. They don't need to bear arms because they're hoping that the Indian state will protect them. That's where people don't necessarily wear arms. But according to one of the proponents of liberal theory, the major proponent, John Locke, he would say that when the state failed to execute or failed to obey its own responsibilities, or when the state is at war with the people, or when the state is waging a war against the people by confiscating their property, destroying their property, the people have a right to rebel. We talk about, right of revolution in the two treatises of government. And when it comes to economic liberalism, we all know that, liberals talk about free market because market is self-regulated system. We don't need state intervention there. Let the market take its own course. And state also promotes competition because competition is based on, supply and demand. And we need state only to protect private property. We also need state state would intervene when there is a monopoly situation. And they also talk about meritocracy. It's very interesting. Here, meritocracy is based on achieved status. Anybody could climb up the ladder based on, the principles of hard work or skill, they put on these categories. So this is completely different from Brahminical meritocracy they talk about. Brahminical meritocracy is based on ascribed status. You're born into a status, born into a merit system. So that is the difference we should keep in mind. And liberals will still talk about social justice. The other variation of liberalism, egalitarian liberalism, where they talk about they need to have a welfare state in place. So overall, as an economic system, when we talk about the political system, but also as an economic system, liberalism promotes or facilitates the development of capitalism. But at the same time, it also promotes secularism when they talk about the freedom of religion and freedom from religion. There's a scope for being part of a religious institution or also not part of it. They also talk about the paradox of tolerance. Here, Karl Popper talks about the intolerance of intolerant. We don't need to tolerate the people who don't tolerate the other. So here, kind of a similar to think of hate the haters kind of situation here. So overall, the liberal framework gives us, focusing on liberties, focusing on freedom, focus of individualism. It kind of facilitates the classical pattern of capitalist system. The question comes to be, is India a liberal state? So based on my reading of Indian Constitution and the Constituent Assembly debates, there's no specific or there's no explicit discussion about liberal values or liberalism within the constitutional framework. But there are values, liberal values, for sure, without explicitly mentioning. For example, our preamble clearly mentions about justice, liberty, equality, and fraternity. We have directive principles of state, which obviously facilitate the the welfare-oriented state, and we also have fundamental rights. I don't need to go over each of them. But there are also illiberal elements within the Constitution. For example, the emergency was declared based on the provisions of Constitution. The sedition laws that are being imposed are based on the constitutional, which are restricting the fundamental rights. And the infamous UAPA, it is part of the Constitution. And Armed Forces, Special Power Act, which is also facilitated by the Constitution. So these are some of the elements that restrict the individual's fundamental rights and liberties. Apart from Constitution, if you look at society, I'm taking Ambedkar. As long as there's a Brahminical supremacy in society, both in discourse and in the form of practice, India cannot be claimed as a liberal society. Because, in Brahmanism, inequality and domination are inherent features. And they're directly in conflict with the principles of justice, principles of social utility. So forget about liberalism. Even if you take Ambedkar, he further pushes this so long. Here he says that, Brahmanism, he tried to equate Brahmanism, fascism is inbuilt within Brahmanism, not just inequalities. Fascism is part of Brahmanism. So here I would like to put an equation this is from the reading of Ambedkar. So Ambedkar reads Nietzsche and figured out that he was influenced by Manusmriti. And in fact, Nietzsche openly claims that Manusmriti is one of the golden texts that he ever read or seen. And of course, Nietzsche was heavily influenced Hitler. Even Ambedkar says Nietzsche's thought is Hitler's action. And Hitler embodied and implemented fascism. Therefore, for me, even in terms of Ambedkar, in the view of Ambedkar, fascism is inbuilt within Brahmanism. I would say that fascism is exported to Europe. It's not that fascism is importing now to India. We could, in the current context, we can call that Brahmanism is a Vishwaguru of fascism. So I have an elaborate discussion in one of my chapters that which is forthcoming, which I titled One-Dimensional Mania. I would be happy to share when it is out very soon. So when you have this Brahmanism as a form of, when you have fascism as a form of Brahmanism, it is very difficult to understand liberal principles within Indian society. So for me, as all of this, as a result of the constitutional limitations, as a result of societal limitations, there's a miscarriage of liberal democracy in Indian context. So one could wonder, why do we need to look at India from a Western gauge, from liberal or not liberal? So here I'm doing this, one for the sake of convenience, and also for the sake of discussion. Of course, we can look at India, any other forms or different shapes. So without having a liberal system in place, liberal institutions functioning, there are liberal, principles here and there, but liberal institutions functioning, liberal society in functioning. So we adapted neoliberal. So sometimes people argue that, how can you call neoliberal neoliberalism, in India, and there is no liberalism at all? I think this is kind of a tricky thing, but of course, there is no liberalism within the Indian society. I'm talking in blanket terms here, a very abstract level, right? So, but when it comes to neoliberalism, there are three dimensions I would like to talk about. One is the neoliberalism and ideology, neoliberalism as a mode of governance, neoliberalism as a policy package. I know most of us know all of this, but I just wanted to recap just to just to bring all of us onto the same page. So I think as an ideology, it talks about TINA. There's no alternative to the self-regulatory market system. And it clearly proposes that, we can't, the global economic integration is irreversible. We can't just go back. It's an inevitable process. We can't reverse it. And as Thomas Friedman mentioned, his famous book, The World is Flat, which means that neoliberalism or globalization creates a win-win situation so that everybody will be treated equally and get equal opportunities. So even the freedom democracy flows across the globe. And in a way, they're kind of creating homogenized society. Socialists have been talking about McDonaldization, globalization, Coca-Colaization, which means that you don't find surprises, with neoliberal policies. Anywhere you go, they have similar policies based on the context. So it's like, anywhere you go in McDonald's, you get the same burger, same fries, whatnot, with the same taste. So this is kind of standardization process. So, but the bottom line here is commodify everything. Commodification for the endless accumulation of capital. That is the basic ideology. But in terms of governance, you take any problem, whether it is Adivasi, whether it is Dalit, whether it is a women issue, they take very technocratic approach to these problems, and they see solution in privatization of the public sectors, and they run institutions in a corporate model, whether it is government or not. And in a big way, they're trying to create, they would say, business friendly or business ease institutions, or business friendly institutions. And more importantly, they wanted to have they want to secure investment climate. This is a crucial point when it comes to dispossession of Adivasis, creating secure investment climate in anywhere it goes. Other principle here is that instead of focusing on, compared to I think in line with liberalism, they talk about the focus on self. So here this social is replaced by self. That's where in late 80s and 90s we see self-help groups. This is a part of the package. This is a part of the model. So you help yourself. The state is kind of rolling back. So here, as a policy package, that are deregulations, liberalizations, privatization that we all know. And they also, heavily focus on trade tariffs and removal of tariffs. But of course, in this part of the world, we are talking about tariffs again, and facilitating the foreign direct investment. These are all policy packages. So now we are talking about all of this, but Marx has mentioned this 150 years ago. So where neoliberalism or liberalism talking about focusing on individuals, if you work hard, if you be part of a market, then you grow, and showing that as a success model. It's a model for growth. But Marx debunks this myth, the myth of capitalism that emerges from individual hard work and free trade. He clearly laid out that the growth of capitalism is because of the brutal expropriation and exploitation of workers. This is a basic thing that we all know. He also talks about some of the mechanisms by which the primitive accumulation of capital happens. He used the primitive just to mention about the original capital. There's no, because he wanted to, in response to critiquing Adam Smith's previous capital, there's no previous capital. Nobody was sitting there on capital. The capital was created by brutal expropriation. And how this expropriation happened, first thing is commodification of everything, including nature. You commodify everything, put a price tag on everything, then privatize, make it a private property, right? We have seen the enclosure of commons in the UK. Then in the whole process, what is happening? The alienation of labor. Labor is separated from his or her own products. Then it creates a division, social division. It creates a rift between primary producers and capitalist laborers, and also creates a rift between town and society. So this rift is not just social rift, but also ecological rift. He talks about it creates a rift between nature and society. So what do we need to know all of this now? Because these processes, these primitive accumulation of capital, so to implement all of this, the state and this obviously use force. So people like David Harvey revives this. They say that there are primitive accumulation of capital out with use the old crude methods, but now state across the world, using the similar methods to dispossess peasants and workers and other people from their own means of livelihood, means of production. So he calls accumulation by dispossession. So accumulation by dispossession, they're using similar methods in a new form. For example, the privatization of public assets, financialization is a new form of dispossession that we see in current times, and management and manipulation of crisis. This is very important. They create a crisis, and they propose a response that leads to a crisis. So crisis, respond, crisis. So I think this crisis, respond, crisis is the source of growth of capitalism. Then they offer a solution in terms of austerity measures. For example, you have to reduce public spending. You have to cut down. You have seen this in this country, the US now. How do you cut down spending, cut down welfare systems, cut down spending on healthcare or education. So this is the same formula has been used across the world, and I think now it is coming, neoliberalism coming back home to the US. And also they talk about state distribution of resources in favor of capital. That's where we talk about land grabs, and land grab is not, and people don't necessarily voluntarily give up their lands. There's a forced evictions that we will discuss in a minute. So against this theoretical framework, this background, I would like to bring in the different modes of different methods of dispossession, in the context of Adivasis. So the dispossession is not happening in one form or shape, and there are multiple ways. And I mentioned only a few here. One is legal and constitutional dispossession, using legal apparatus to dispossess, and dispossession of Adivasis from their land through force. When I say force, they're using actual militaries, the militarized dispossession. And it's not just economic, it's not just political, but also socio-cultural dispossession. We need to understand in a comprehensive ways. So when it comes to legal and constitutional dispossession, as we all know, the 5th schedule of the Indian Constitution, it guarantees some of the land rights for Adivasis. But the central and state governments often bypass these provisions and taking over, encroaching their lands. And we also have, PESA and the Panchayat's Extension to Schedule Areas Act, which also again, allows the customary rights or their communal rights to have, governance rights of their own property, their own territories. But it's rarely implemented in full. We also have forest right acts, which also often ignored or revoked to facilitate the industrial projects. So these are all happening, in a broad daylight. These are all happening, within the purview of the Constitution that we talk about. And we also have another kind of, legal and constitutional dispossession, where we talk about digital war. There's a very important study, particularly coming from our friends in Jharkhand. So where they use the digitization techniques, they digitize the land records, and they recategorize some of the Adivasi, the so-called tribal lands, into land banks, which can be assigned to corporations. So here it's a kind of legal plunder. The digitization happening legally, and even these people who are on the land don't even know their land has been already grabbed through these digital means. And when again, one hand you're grabbing land. If there's a resistance, a protest, then you're criminalizing this resistance. Then you can easily sophisticatedly label them as Maoists or Naxalites. Then you can arrest them or kill them through extrajudicial means. And if there are public intellectuals coming forward to defend the case of Adivasis, then obviously call them urban Naxals and imprison them. You have seen them in the case of BK16 and beyond. And there are of course not necessarily urban public interest, but also numerous Adivasis were put behind the bars for resisting the dispossession process. So one is the legal means, the other is through force. If you actually wanted to see the displacement politics, if you wanted to actually see who is a true patriot in this in Indian context, for me, the true patriots comes to be Adivasis who have sacrificed their land and life. The 40% of displaced people are Adivasis. If anybody is sacrificing anything, that's the first one comes to be Adivasis, because they have been displaced several times. The same people displaced for several times for several mining industrial projects, even if a big dam in a highway, a railway, or industrial corridors, or special economic zones. So they have been displaced in the name of development, and it is not their voluntary choice. It's not that oh, we are sacrificing our life for the sake of nation, or they're not doing it. They don't even know what is this development, what is this growth. I mean, they don't even comprehend all of this, but they have been, because they're voiceless, they have been forced to displaced. So there's an important booklet that is just published by India Justice Project and ECCHR, In the Name of Development. This actually talks about indigenous rights and how it's been violated by the Indian state. Particularly, this talks about in the context of Chhattisgarh. So I'm also going to talk about particularly Chhattisgarh and particularly the Bastar region. So in Chhattisgarh, there are several minerals, several resources, excluding, I mean, I'm not mentioning here forest-related or non-timber produce related resources, but as the minerals, they're 38% of tin ore, 20% of bauxite, 18% of iron ore, and 17% of coal, 4% of diamonds are deposited in this state. So, but if you look at the mineral map, if you look at Adivasi map, and if you look at the Maoist map, so you will see what I'm going to talk about. If you overlap, if you look at minerals, you look at Adivasis and the so-called Red Corridor media after projects, there is something common. They all fall in line. So then then this will explain many things that what is happening in central India. So there are minerals. In order to extract these minerals, we need to exclude somebody who is living there. According to this political economist, Travis Fast, exclusion must often precede extraction. You need to dispossess them in order to possess minerals underneath their feet. Right? So, according to Arundhati Roy, she talks about a three-layered approach. There's a three-layered socio-ecological process happening. There are minerals or natural wealth at the bottom rack. Then the Adivasis living on top of it. Then Adivasis no longer Adivasis. They are of different politics. I'm just mentioning it in Maoist, but they are with different politics. Predominantly, particularly in Chhattisgarh and Bastar area, they are under the influence of Maoism for sure. So they are the Maoist Adivasis, Adivasi Maoist, right? So in order to tap into the bottom rock, the bottom shelf in this process, natural wealth, they have to remove Adivasis first. You can't just kill them in this society, in this day and time. So they have to label them as Maoist. So this is where the crisis is coming. And the Indian state already signed hundreds of memorandums of understanding, MOUs, and they have a very challenging time to implement them. As per my understanding, there are about 600 MOUs signed in Chhattisgarh alone. There are only 100 were being implemented. There's a conflict between, according to Arundhati Roy, MOUs versus Maoist. So here, who are these MOUs? What does it represent? For me, it represents the neoliberal drive, and the Maoist, maybe the Adivasi interest, obviously there, right? So this is the broader context in which we're talking about the conflict. And of course, the Indian state is using all kinds of military approaches. And it's not BJP now, it starts off with the Congress and before. And they started with, they started the vigilante groups first. They didn't intervene. They didn't send forces first. They used the vigilante forces. They started with Jan Jagan Abhayan. It's like a very, awareness campaign group, but it's not awareness. It's basically elimination group. Then they transformed that into Salva Zudum, which is in Gondi, they call it purification, and it started in 2005. So even the labels they put, purification, and what is impure there to purify, is again, a very Brahmanical frame of operation, whether it is a Congress or it is a BJP, right? So when Supreme Court struck down, you can't have vigilante groups in a democratic society. So the Salawazudum was stopped, but the renamed, the same force, the same vigilante groups were renamed as special police officers. Then later, the special police officer were relabeled as district reserve guards. These names that you hear in day-to-day news now, district reserve force has been taking over, the Maoist camps or something. That this is the news you hear. District reserve guards. These district reserve guards are coming from the Salawazudum path, and you know that there's a Green Ant operation. They started in 2009. According to Manmohan Singh, who clearly mentioned that this is to handle the biggest internal security threat, that was the Maoist. So the Green Ant operation, of course, that's where the Sai Baba came into picture as defending the rights of Adivasis, because you take any of these operations, Salwa-Zulum or Green Ant operation, then Samadhan later, the major victims are Adivasis. Now they started Operation Kagar. Kagar may be the final assault or final solution. Of course, if you know Nazi history, they also use the same slogan, the final solution. Amit Shah is also talking about the same language, Operation Kagar. So here the interesting thing is they are continuing all these previous regimes' tactics and processes, and this time they have a deadline. A war never waged with a deadline, but this time, Amit Shah is waging a war against Adivasis and the Maoists with a deadline, March 31st, exactly 1 year from now. So he wanted to create a Maoist-free India. And in the past 14 months, they already killed 300, people, including majority of them are Adivasis, innocent Adivasis. And of course, they also killed Maoists. So, we know why this militarization happening, right? And in this to conduct this militarization process, they have been conducting, they have been building military camps, paramilitary camps. And again, for building paramilitary camps, they are dispossessing Adivasi land. They're grabbing lands, from Adivasis. In Bastar, in recent months, they have built up 100 new paramilitary camps. And just to give a sense of what is happening in Bastar region, if you look at this, these are some of the camps that were reported in Citizens Report on security and insecurity that was published in August 2024. For every 2-3 miles, there's a camp. Imagine the concentration of police force or military force in this area. After Kashmir, I think this is the so militarized region in Indian context. And what do they have in these camps? These camps becoming a, they're holding. They can be. They're firing. There are cases of bombshells dropping from these camps. They are operating drones from here. They're creating a surveillance hubs in these camps. They know every movement of Adivasis. So what are we talking about in terms of a liberal democratic apparatus? Where is it? There's nothing. And they're also building commando training centers for jungle warfare, because the terrain they're operating is unknown to them. And for example, Abuzmat, which is like unknown, the literal meaning is unknown terrain, unknown land. They don't even have, not Indian state, but even British even didn't have basic topographic maps of Abuzmat. They don't have any idea of where they are getting into. So in order to train all these, in order to train the troops to navigate these difficult terrains, they are building, jungle warfare training centers. For example, one in Kanker, also they are in Jharkhand. Again, they're building these jungle warfare institutions, not in small areas. They're taking, in some, I think one of the jungle warfare schools, they have 100 mile radius school. This is a huge area they are taking. So again, there's a displacement. And on one hand, they're displacing. On the other hand, and also they are taking up the public space and schools just to occupy whenever, because they're turning these schools and public space into military bases. This is what have been reported in Jharkhand and Chhattisgarh. So while on one hand actively pushing Adivasis out of lands, they're also they're also facilitating the secure climate for investments, the secure peace zones for corporations. So wherever they clear the land and give that land to corporation, this is what is happening. We have seen this in the case of Adani's mining and Tata and SR steel projects in Bastar and other places. So they clear the land. It's like escorting corporations, and you're doing this with a deadline, that by March 31st, 2026, will eliminate all Maoist. So this is, I think, the very problematic thing. Maoists are not there with the identity cards. Hey, you are the Maoist, you can be eliminated. I'm not suggesting that Maoists should be eliminated just like that. But even in the logic of Amit Shah, so how do you identify? It's like going to Palestine now and say, hey, are you a Hamas or a Palestinian? I mean, there's a very gray area. I mean, you already created a situation where it's difficult to differentiate. There's a strong association between Adivasis and Maoists because they have been working there for the past 50 years. And Adivasis become Maoist, declassified themselves to Adivasis. So there's no way one could claim that, we will wipe off Maoist by, 2026. I mean, one could always dream about it for sure. So apart from the political, economic, militarized dispossession, there's also another form of dispossession happening in socio-cultural sphere. The forced assimilation is happening. And there are Gayatri Parivars operating, and they also, Vanavasi Kalyan ashrams are all over Adivasi terrain. And here they talk about, they don't call Adivasis, they call Vanavasi, the forest dwellers. So what will happen if these Adivasis come out of forest? So it is very, fragmented approach to understand Adivasis. We're talking Adivasis because these are the original inhabitants of the land. And this is one of the reasons why Indian state never acknowledged Adivasis as indigenous people of India. It ratified many indigenous laws, and it ratifies indigenous provisions in international forums, but it never acknowledged that we have indigenous people. Because if Adivasis are indigenous people, who are the non-indigenous people and living in this country? So there's the legal technical issue. So that's why they don't use Adivasi as a term. They often go the Vanavasis. So against all kinds of dispossession violence, Adivasis are not sitting idle. They're not just struggling for their identity. I would not call Adivasi struggle as an identity, part of identity politics. They're talking about Jal, Jangal, Jameen, Ijjat, and Adhikar. They're talking about water, forest, land, self-respect, and political power. And they are rejecting all oppressive models of developmentalism and neoliberalism. Developmentalism before neoliberalism comes in. At least there are some form of welfare system in developmentalism. When it comes to neoliberalism, it's absolute corporatization. So they are resisting corporate encroachment. They are resisting militarization, and they are demanding, the implementation of the constitutional provisions related to Adivasis. So when you look at any struggles that you see, other than the Maoist movement, Maoists are not necessarily demanding for implementation of a constitution because they don't have faith in constitution. They're fighting against a constitution. So that's their own the political agenda. But when it comes to Adivasis, majority of them, for example, the Siljar project in Bastar, which is one of the, I just wanted to give some examples. I don't want to go all the struggles they've been doing. But in Siljar protest, particularly during COVID, when everybody's, everything is in a chaotic moment and everybody's going back to villages, then they see a new military camp established in Siljar without the consultation of, without the consent of local people. So good thing happened with the COVID that all the youngsters, youth, went back to these villages. They see, a military camp coming up. Then they started protesting, military camps because they know what military camp does in their areas, because they know what the police do in their areas. So then there was when they protested, then of course there was a state retaliation. They killed 5 individuals, including a pregnant woman. That triggered a bigger protest. Then that led to the formation of Mulwasi Bachao Manch, an organization, a democratic organization of Adivasis. Then the protest did not stop there. It spread across Bastar region. Then it becomes, one protest become 30 protest site, and it has been going on for the past 4 years. We don't necessarily know all of this from mainstream media because they wanted to censor that information. But these protests have been going on for the past 4 years. But October 30th, 2024, a few months back, the Mulawasi Bachao Manch have been banned, stating that they are being working with Maoists. They have been going with the agenda of anti-India, and they also arrested some of their key leaders. Sunita Potom, and last week Raghu Midiami was also arrested. He was one of the young dynamic leaders of MBM. So when there's, even I just looked at the NIS arrest sheet, where they say Raghu Medium has been working with anti-India agenda. Then that create some curiosity for me. Who is these people? MBM. What is their agenda? What is their anti-India agenda? Then I looked it up. Their their own constitution. They have their own constitution. They clearly, a friend of mine translated and also gave me, I want to give us some glimpse of their objectives, what they are working with. What they're demanding is that implement Gram Sabha rights under 5th Schedule and PESA Act and Forest Act. And they're talking about, we are going to fight to protect our Mulawasi existence, identity, and self-respect. Oppose forced religious conversations, either it can be into Hinduism or Christianity, because they wanted to preserve their own identity. They are against fake encounters and massacres, atrocities, and arrests, illegal arrests, most of them. And they support, often, either Adivasis or the Maoists project as a anti-developmentalist or anti-nationalist, right? But here we need to have inclusive development. And obviously, they resist forced evictions. And they're not just talking about themselves. They're talking about save forests, save water, save land, save the environment. It's all for us, right? And they're talking about education, healthcare, and clean water. They're talking about, dignified jobs. It's not a menial jobs, dignified jobs. They're talking about, celebrating their values, collectivism, nature protection, respect. They're thinking in a rational manner. They're there to combat superstitions, substance abuse. They wanted to preserve their identity by celebrating their culture, their music, literature, dance. They're promoting their own language. Sit back and think, where is anti-India agenda here? I see their constitution better than the Indian constitution in my own way, because this is they're talking about collectivism. They're not necessarily talking about their own rights. They're also talking about the welfare or of the society in general. They're talking about saving forests. But this movement has been criminalized. It's been banned, and even talking about this movement is now maybe a crime. Defending these organizations can be a crime, and now we're still talking about India as a liberal state. And it's not just the Adivasis and Maoists fighting against state encroachment. There are also other organizations, non-governmental organizations, particularly here, Hasdev Aranya Bachao Sangarshan Samiti. So here you see on their posters, you see Gandhi, you see Ambedkar, Bhagat Singh and Ambedkar. It's kind of a bringing diversified perspectives. And obviously, many Gandhians are also part of this. Many Ambedkarites are part of this. So I think, but they wanted to brush all these movements with one stroke, that, they're all Maoist. And so that, it justifies their oppression. Obviously, of course, Maoists are obviously there, and they're also organizing Adivasis into different, several mass organizations. They have cultural organizations, Chetana, Manch, they have present organizations, they have women organization, Krantikari Adivasi Mahila Sangathan. According to some sources, Krantikari Adivasi Mahila Sangathan has their membership itself 100,000. I think according to some estimates, it's one of the biggest women organization, membered organization in India. They also have a Krantikari Adivasi Bal Sangathan. I mean, how do you eliminate? I mean, if you see all these hundreds of thousands of people as Adivasi, we are not just talking about armed guerrillas. We're talking about the Maoists. The Maoists, these are all the Maoists. And how do we eliminate them? Because particularly these mass organizations, they are not working with arms. They are working with ideas of a better world. And they're also part of different departments that Janatan Sarkar is operating. They have finance, defense, agriculture, judicial, education, health, forest, and public relations. They are working in different organizations. So here you can see a congruence of Janatan Sarkar and Adivasi way of life. It's not something imposed on them. It's kind of a bottom-up approach. They are doing it. So while all this happening, and Amit Shah is still dreaming about eliminating the Maoists. I think his dream is coming not from just elimination. He has a deeper dream. The dream comes from RSS, establishment of Hindu Rashtra. So a few days ago, Indira Jaisingh mentioned that you can never have a Hindu Rashtra under a secular constitution. Yes, it is right, but I have my own reservations on this statement, because Hindu Rashtra can be established while keeping the skeleton of constitution. They destroy the spirit and they still keep the skeleton and operate with it. That's what they have been doing. And they are presenting now Vikasit Bharat by 2047, which is a Brahmanical Hindutva corporatization in a sense. So for this Vikasit Bharat, or Hindu Rashtra in neoliberal times, it can, as long as there is they can establish, they can get away with secularism by amendments or by rewriting some of the things into constitution. But as long as there is Maoist movement or other big left movement exist, Hindu Rashtra cannot be achieved. So they see a real threat. I mean, they are very smart. We're not saying that they are just doing it, as part of their exercise. They clearly know who is the enemy, where the threat coming from. As long as there are Maoists in the country, they cannot establish Hindu Rashtra. As long as there is a secularism in the constitution, there are Dalits and Adivasis rallying around this Muslims or other minorities are rallying around this concept. So they can't. So they wanted to attack at multi-front. They're attacking the constitution, attacking, uh, um, you know, um, um, the Maoist and other movements. So the point I wanted to drive is that is Operation Kagar is not limited to Adivasis. They started this to just to normalize violence. They wanted to feed violence for all of us. Then we will be immune to it. Then we don't even recognize, if somebody killed next door because it's so normalized, so standardized. So in the whole process, they just want to empty out the spirit of the Constitution. I think they are doing what they wanted to do. The question comes to us. I just wanted to, the whole thing present a moral challenge, as I mentioned in my early opening with Sai Baba's statement, right? We need to ask ourselves, do we consider ourselves civilized? Where do we stand in this crisis? And what must we do at this historical juncture? Can we be part of the solution or can we be part of the problem? This is the only crude binary that we have, unfortunately. But we need to, I think, decide on this. And I think I will stop here and I will take questions if you have any. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ashok. If you can keep the slide 40 on, because that is where I believe we should all dwell on. So thank you very much for the insightful and well-articulated lectures on dispossession of accumulation and the Adivasi anti-systematic struggles. I believe the efforts you put in for preparation of presentation speaks volume about how close this issue of tribals to you. It is really very heartfelt to know how systematically this 8% of tribal population in India are dispossessed of their livelihood, cultural, and religion. The atrocities on people who are fighting for their survival, like MBM, is very serious, and we should highlight this in whatever forums we can. But it is also very heartening to know about the Jantana Sarkar. And I fully agree with what you conclude in one of the slides, that there is a miscarriage of democracy due to Brahminical takeover of Indian society and Indian government. A digital war, what you explained, is a good example of this. I would like to highlight one quote from your presentation. A true tolerant society must be intolerant of intolerance to the survive. And I believe that is where our resistance and our action to start. Thank you very much, Ashokji, again. And now we will open this for Q&A session. So if you have any questions, please raise your hands, or you can put your questions in the chat box. And to ensure that everyone has an opportunity to participate, we suggest you to please stay with our allotted time frame. I kindly ask for your cooperation in keeping discussion concise and focused. If the conversation begins to prolong, I may need to gently steer it back on track or move forward to accommodate everyone's time. So thank you for understanding and cooperation. So before we begin our Q&A session, I would like to announce about the Awakened, the BHG digital magazine. The Awakened is a Boston Study Group's digital magazine which provides a platform for all the Ambedkarites in the diaspora to share their stories, thoughts, views, and talents to enhance the Ambedkarite movement. We are all looking forward to literary contributions for our spring issue, which will be published on 14th April on the occasion of Dr. B.R. Ambedkar Jayanti. So please visit our website, www.bostonstudygroup.org, or email us at contact@bostonstudygroup.com if need further for any further information. So thank you very much. So I'm opening for the Q&A session. So please let us know if you have any questions. So I have one question. So you dwell about, I believe, the wealth or the land dispossessions, and you talk about the cultural dispossessions also. But at the same time, I see that RSS has made very inroads into this tribal life by their sevaks or whatever the volunteers they have. And even the religious disposition is happening in the tribal area. Earlier, they never, I believe, worship about the Ram or Krishna. They have their own deities, their own, basically, they are the uh, worshipper of the nature. That is what is all the Adivasis is about. But nowadays, we see lot of enthusiasm going on with the about the Ram Mandir and the Ram and the other religious deity that Hindutva is propagating. So, you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah. I think the Garvapa, they're also presenting the Garvapas to them as well. It's not because they see Adivasis are slipped off the Hindu order that they wanted to bring them into the Hindu fold, and these some of the they are ashramas, they have schools, they're presenting. They obviously they are bringing Hindu way of worshipping into their lands, and there's some persuasion. There are also some force. There are also forceful conversions as well, and some most of the times these things also attach it to economic benefits. In order to avail some of the benefits, you are to take up this practice. So I think that is the cultural invasion is clearly happening in the Adivasi terrain. So when I say social culture, it also includes the religious conversions.
Okay. So, means now they are basically identifying themselves as the Hindu, or they identified as a the still Adivasi or the tribal.
No, I think they are bringing them into Hindu fold, but not sure where they will be kept. Whether they'll be seen as touchables or untouchables in the order. But they obviously, because they are not living within the social fabric of, they're not sharing the same social fabric, so they are kind of brought them into the fold, but not necessarily giving the status of touchable or untouchable. So overall, there's a strong influence, I would say. They're changing in practice, their practices. Who are they worshiping, and all of this. Maybe others would, who are more familiar, can join and educate us as well.
Okay, good. So Priya has a questions, but before that, I just wanted to just prolong on this discussion.
Sure.
So whether that the organizations like this MBM, correct, or the Janatana Sarkar, are they basically identify this particular threat? I'm specifically talking about the religious dispositions.
Oh yeah, I mean,
Whether
yeah.
they are working towards that and educating the tribal community about how this is going to impact it. And as you said, means we don't know whether they will be treated as untouchables and all these. Whereas the Adivasis has their separate identity. Even if um, means so far, I believe they were never treated as untouchables. Only they were um, uh, not like the scheduled caste communities, correct?
Yeah.
And so, if that particular fear, what you are saying, that there is chances that they may be the part of the untouchable community, that is very serious thing. And whether these tribal people or the organizations aware about this one, and whether they are working at, I believe that is where they should also concentrate.
Yeah. I mean, within their constitution, as I shown, they have clear mentioning of it. So they see it's a threat to their own identity, their own existence. They know that once you let Hindu forces approach them, then they succumb into their system, and they know where they will place. So they are very aware of the fact that Hindu Hindu organizations, how they operate. So they are very clear. They acknowledge the problem. They're obviously, defending their own identity and rejecting the conversions.
Okay, great. Thank you, sir. So Priya, you raised the hand. Please ask your question, and then we will go to Padma.
Thank you, Ashokji. It was a wonderful presentation. I apologize, I couldn't focus much because of certain distractions at this point. But overall, it was very knowledgeable. I have a question related to today's presentation. What are the psychological impacts of disposition on Adivasi identity and their relationship with the ancestral lands?
I think this is a great question and understudied, under-acknowledged, because they are in a war situation. Particularly for the past 1 year. It's like how you feel when your house is bulldozed. How you are uprooted. It's a complete destruction of self, your soul, and everything. So when you are uprooted, it's not just physical uprootment, but also because particularly the Adivasis have a very spiritual meaning to nature, their habitat, their surroundings. So basically, you're destroying the entire self. That definitely have severe psychological implications for Adivasi youth, and because there is also kind of you create a generational disruption. You're uprooting from their way of life, and also from their histories, from their traditions, their cultural practices. You're completely alienated, completely. This alienation obviously has severe psychological issues. So I don't have any particular study at hand, but there must be studies. I mean, one could also look at these issues from how war can impact psychological health. Whether one could relate to Gaza, for example. Now, what is a psychological situation of Palestinian in living in Gaza? The same thing happening in Bastar now. They are dropping bombs, which according to Indian constitution, we're not supposed to do that. But there are bombs, shells all over, and killing people. And they're not living in their houses or huts in the night. They're sleeping in jungle, because we don't know. They don't know when they will be attacked and killed. So it's a constant threat. They're living under constant threat. Which is for me equivalent to death. From a psychological point of view.
Priya, do you have any follow-up question?
Oh yeah, thank you so much. I think I could relate to what you were saying, considering the recent Gaza situation that the people are facing, and it's very dramatic. And I think it is also hard to understand what these people must have been going through. But it can be a weird comparison, but I can relate to what you were saying when you said that uplifting from the root. I could relate to this movie called Avatar. I think they have described the same situation that you tried to explain to my question, and it's very unfortunate that this is happening and has been happening. Thank you for answering my question.
Thank you, Priya.
Okay, Padma.
Thank you so much, Ashok, for this fantastic talk. So I know Ashok quite well. Really appreciate your detailed research. And thank you, Sanjay and BSG, for this fantastic presentation. My question, Ashok, is living in the United States, and all of us coming together, and this kind of unity is so important, regardless of some minor differences we all may have. So many of you might know this group called Savera, the Indian American Muslim Council, Ambedkar King Study Circle, India Civil Watch International, and Hindus for Human Rights are studying the Brahminical organizations in this country, and they have come out with some excellent reports. I'm wondering how together we can demand that this policy of extrajudicial violence is totally antithetical, right, to our constitution. And how do we demand in a very powerful, united voice, the release of all these activists, more recently, this young person, Raghu, from the Mulwasi Bachao Andolan, which is a very democratic organization. All these thousands of people who are unjustly incriminated and jailed, and Father Stan Swami wrote beautifully about this and sadly had to die in prison. So my question is this: in all this, what can we do from here? I know as we all came together, during the farmers' movement, anti-CAA struggles, release of Binayak Sen. So if you had any thoughts, I would really appreciate that.
I think, there's no one solution or one answer, but, India, I think, as a state, banks on its image outside world as a, liberal democratic society and state. We need to address that image itself. While you're killing people and dispossessing people, how can you still claim that they are the greatest, biggest democracy in the world? So it's not that you just have a campaign against India, but we are saying that you restore constitution, implement constitution, and implement and practice your own constitution. While killing people who are opposing constitution. So Kana Brown clearly once mentioned that he was posed, why are you defending Maoists who are against the constitution? He said, I'm not. So me defending Maoists or not is a personal thing, but what I'm demanding is Indian state should uphold its own constitution because at least the Indian state believes in it. So we, I think, need to demand the implementation of constitution in Adivasi areas and also other areas, and to stop killing people in an extrajudicial manner. I think the only way is to talking about it and writing about it. There's no other way, or demonstrations or whatnot. There are other ways of doing it, but there's a myth that there's a labeling, all that there's normalization of this violence. Even the language they use in the media, they sanitize or they eliminated, they neutralized the brutal language, inhuman language they're using, right? And we need to problematize these, as someone is in academics, and it's my responsibility, I feel, otherwise I would not be here. I think we should all take responsibilities. There's always a threat. The state, when the state, state for me is a Brahmanical state now. They are doing their job. I think we need to do our job. Our job is to embrace the spirit of Stan Swami or G.N. Sai Baba or Pandu Naroti and other Adivasis. They are fighting for us. When they are fighting in these deep jungles, they are not. What will they lose? They lose a small piece of land, but they are fighting for bigger cause. We are all. If we want to breathe fresh air every day, we need to be part of this struggle, I guess.
Thank you, Ashok. Padma, any follow-up questions, or you are okay?
No, I won't take more time, but I was just saying that Modi, the only time he spoke after the horrible violence in Manipur was when there was an editorial in the New York Times. So as folks living in the United States, I think if we come out with powerful statements against this, and as you yourself, Sanjay and Ashok, both of you have mentioned, upholding the Constitution, if that's the only thing we even demand, he might actually say something.
And also we should also focus on the link between the corporations and in the Modi regime, particularly in case of Adani. As we know, in the Department of Justice has indicted Adani, but he's still doing business here, and also for example friends in London, they are fighting against the, the branding of Adani. In London Science Museum, they labeled one of these wings as Adani Green Mission or something. Our friends can talk about that. So I mean, they're fighting against even the discourse level. They're fighting at the brainwashing mission level. So right, I think we need to also talk about the linkages between the corporations and the media, and also the government, how they are operating together.
Okay, thank you, Ashok. So before I call the next Venkat for the next questions, I just wanted to talk about some discussions I had with Ashok before we started this session. So Boston Study Group is for all the people who are operates in any form, correct? So and so we would definitely like to have many more discussions on the tribal. That is where basically we are lacking, reaching out to the tribal community or the tribal leaders or the speakers to come on this forum and talk about their issues and what is going on in their world. So if you are interested or if you know anyone who can come, please for any discussions or the speech. Please let us know any topic you wanted to discuss about the tribal community and tribal issues. Please share with us on the chat box, or you can send us the email. And if you have any speakers in mind from that community, please let us know. We would definitely like to reach out to them and listen to them. Means from today's speech from Ashok, I'm really very encouraged because we should aware of what is going on that world. It is a 8% population of the India we are talking about. Okay, so with that, Venkat.
Yeah, I think Rajesh raised his hand first. Why don't you go to
Okay,
Rajesh?
so the Rajesh, you are the first then. Rajesh?
Yes, okay. Yeah, so actually I have a question about, so you mentioned the Adivasis constitute about 8% of the population, so that's about 100 million people. So how many of them you think are living under this this situation, and how many are kind of, like relatively free, like how many people? Any idea?
Particularly, if you're talking about Bastar region itself, I think my friend Latika is here. She can give a better number. I would say a few hundreds of, thousands. Particularly in the Bastar region itself, in some of the projects, they are dislocating or dispersing 15,000 Adivasis in one Hasdev area. The area is about, they would say 150,000 acres, and the people living there are 15,000 or something like that. So Latika, you already raised your hands. Can you give the numbers, just to help me out here? Do you have any idea?
Yeah, I'm just looking it up actually, and I put my hand up to point to our international statement. Would you like to talk about it? I'm just checking the number from our thing.
Yeah, as part
I've put it link, yeah.
Okay, so so as part of the INSAF India, International Solidarity for Academic Freedom, and in collaboration with other international organizations, we at INSAF believe that when you say academic freedom, it's not a freedom of our intellectual curiosities, our intellectual exercises. It's about the freedom of the people who study or work with Adivasis, Dalits, women, minorities. When we are extending the definition of academic freedom beyond freedom of ourselves, but to the people we are the so-called subjects of our knowledge systems. So as part of that, we came up with the international statement, on different aspects, particularly most of the things that I talked about already mentioned in these reports. Yeah, Lautika, maybe you should talk about. Yeah,
I'll come in now. I have put in the chat actually the numbers as well. That in Bastar is about 33,000 square kilometers, which is about the size of Belgium, and it is about home to about 2.7 million people, about 2/3 of whom are Adivasis. So we are talking of huge numbers here. And I've also put a link to an alert on the website of the ICCA consortium, which gives a good summary of the background that which Ashok has been pointing, and all the links to the various documents actually, which even Ashok mentioned in his statement. They're all linked there as well. So it would hardly take you 10 minutes to read the alert, and the link to the statement is also there in that. And we have over 40 organizations already signed the statement, but it'll be great to have more people, also about 170 signatures on the whole. We are still gathering signatures as we plan to also publicize it more.
And I should also mention the digital war document I mentioned. Latika is one of the authors in that effort. So if you need a copy of it, then I would be happy to share the digital war copy.
Thank Latika.
Okay, thank you.
So Rajesh, does it answer your question?
Yeah. So I just trying to have some number, because I'm from Jharkhand, and I know that the entire Adivasi population in Jharkhand, which is a total of 1/3 there, I don't think that everyone is affected. Probably, I don't know the number. Maybe maybe a fraction of that are affected, and a fraction of them are not. So I just wanted to have some idea about that.
I mean, even in Jharkhand, they're talking about the displacement for construction of a jungle warfare school or military camps, military training school. So,
thanks. So before I call Venkat, I will just read one more question from Dipti Mary Minch. So what measures can be taken to strengthen the right to say no to mining in 5th scheduled areas?
I think the measures is, we have to create some pressure on this in the Indian state to implement the 5th schedule, because most of them are no-go zones. They are relabeling, or they are just ignoring the no-go zones, particularly, if you read, Hasdev's, forest area, then, Adivasi, Adani should not be there in the first place, because it's a no-go zone, because rich biodiversity, and then there are all kinds of animals, living there. Particularly, there's a recent report coming out, the conflict between animals and elephants, humans and elephants. There are about 45 or 46 elephants have been killed because of, because the people are encroaching the forest, their habitat. Then the animals are coming into the mainstream, the so-called mainstream, so that there is a conflict. So I think there's no way. I mean, there's no the terrain we're talking about is very. I mean, as you know, the 10 states are part of the scheduled tribe areas, 5th schedule areas, and a lot of places where you have an absolute no-go zone, but the Indian state is bulldozing its own norms and rules and taking it over. So the only measure is to pressurize them through civil action. There's no other way other than doing it. Because they already captured the legal system, the media, and all of that, right? I mean, we should also keep that in mind. Where is the court system? Where is the judiciary when people are killing extrajudicial manner? Where is the court system when the land is grabbed through legal means, by digitization or by other forced evictions? I mean, there's a complete silence from judiciary, and even from some of the mainstream oppositional parties. So I think it's a collaborative effort. And they say that we are all together. Then the oppressed people have to realize where we are now. How can we come together?
Great, thanks. So considering the time, I believe we will have Venkat's question, the last one, before we close the session. So Venkat, please go ahead.
Yeah. Thank you, Ashok, Kumbamu, for wonderful presentation. So I know your work. I mean, on and off, I come across and read. So one of the, I mean, it's a more, broader, question or comment I want to make. I mean, most of academics and who are coming from the school of thought equate basically. I mean, don't get me my words wrong, but to just to emphasize the point, I want to use these words. Romanticize with communism. We romanticize with, of course, what is happening in Chhattisgarh and Bastar is completely wrong, and people like me deny it. But my question about communism in India and the history of communism, what they have done, and is there a time that we have to move away from it to find some new isms? I mean, it didn't exist before Marx, and 200 years now, I think we have seen good and bad of communism, and broadly, it is gone. Okay, and believe it, I mean, you probably know this. I grew up in the hinterlands of Telangana when the communist, especially the second wave of communist movement, the CPI-ML Maoist, and it was not called Maoist at that time. Was at peak. Okay, so I grew up, idealizing these heroes and all that, right? Communist leaders. So, couple of things, in India. I mean, where I am right now, I think first of all, I completely reject the armed struggle at this age and time. You don't need to go that route. That is leading to a lot of destruction. I don't know. You can liberate a society with armed struggles at this time and age in the world. Okay, and then we have a constitution. I mean, good or bad. I mean, democracies are messy. Um, Even the constitution, it might have some flaws and all that. But I I believe we have a very good framework to work with and resolve some major issues, and especially upliftment of downtrodden in India. So while leveraging that, even uh, Pule, Ambedkar, while the whole world at that time was going against British, they quietly worked for the rights of the marginalized sections within, So, and the other important thing about, communism in India, I mean, you really took to talk about what BJP and Hindutva is doing and Brahmanism coming to in, and then as if, the communism is fighting Brahmanism, but the fact, people like us, if you critically evaluate, the communism in India died because of they never addressed caste, and the Brahmanism was plagued right from the the so-called.
environment.
Yeah. Just let me finish. Yeah, please.
पूर्ण जगत नहीं company.
Oh, sorry,
No, I
somebody.
think
Okay.
somebody is
Yeah,
Lalit.
yeah. I'm
Lalit,
almost
can you
concluding. Yeah.
mute yourself?
Yeah.
Okay,
So,
thank you.
uh, right from the CPI CPM leadership to Naxalite leadership, it's been purely dominant caste, right? I mean, this is a well known. And then there is a history of throwing people out, like Satyamurthy, who was the only Dalit who could reach to the Politburo of Maoist party, was thrown out at certain time. And people like Maroju Veerana, who wanted to, you know, work as a caste, and caste is the class, class is the caste in India, and he wanted to, fight in the ideology of Marx and Ambedkar. He struggled, and he was thrown out of the party after several years of struggle. So, I mean, just it's a much broader. I don't actually belittle the people who are sacrificing their life. My own classmates, very dear friends, died in the Naxalite movement. Very very close friends. I by no means I belittle them and the sacrifices they have done. But as an academic, as a people, we are trying to think at a bigger level. Don't we need to come up with a new ism? Okay, that will really come. The leadership comes from the bottom of the society and takes India to next egalitarian, and let's move away from this communism. I mean, it's I think it's a time we have to move away from it. So that's my comment and critical view of the thing. Please, as an academician, professor, you run ROT and capitalism, socialism, and all that. Please, yeah, you can respond to that, Ashok.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you for your
Thank you.
observation, Venkat.
Yeah.
I really appreciate this.
Yeah.
I respect your observation for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
So where I come from is, it is not. I mean, I would happy to having the ideological historical debate. I mean, I would love that, but in this particular context, it's not about whether we support Maoism or whether we support or not. I mean, this is not. Here the challenge is. I mean, you mentioned, what did the Maoist movement or revolutionary movement brought to society? There's no, as if you're saying that the great sacrifices are great, but they will not yield any result. But even if you take
the transformative, I mean, I sorry, just to interrupt. Like I said, there are certain things. Telangana actually was better off that initial armed struggle, and later, I mean, they've done it, but as a total transformation to lasting, transformation, they could not achieve. That's what I would say. Okay, I don't want to, like I said, belittle. I don't want to completely say they were completely useless. No, in the time and context, what they did at certain points really helped the society. Okay, but I think we have to move away from that now. That's what. Sorry to just to qualify that. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So I think the thing here we look at is who do we blame? So who do we blame? Whether we blame the state or the Maoists? Some people would say that if Maoists were not there in the Adivasi areas, there would not be a violence. There would not be. That is not the case here. The Maoists have been there for the past 50 years. So do you think Adivasis would be better off without Maoist in Chhattisgarh, Jharkhand, other areas? Do you think can you imagine any democratic movement within Telangana context? Because you mentioned it. Do you imagine any democratic movement without the influence of the Maoist? If we take Madiga Reservation Porat Samiti, or we take a Telangana movement, we take even Maroj Veerana, they're all coming from the class struggle that they Maoists advocated for. So the question is not about whether we idealize, but romanticize Maoism or communism. The question is whether the Indian state can implement its own constitution. So if the Maoists are wrong, act constitutionally. You set up your own system in place, then act accordingly, right? So I think the Indian state is violating its own due process and procedures, and now we cannot just blame Maoists just to cover up the shortfallings of the Indian Constitution and on its implementation, right? So it's like the same goes with Palestinian example. Just because just to in the pretext of eliminating Hamas, they're taking over Palestine. In pretext of eliminating Maoists, they're taking over Adivasi terrain. So I think it's a broader issue. I think rather than bogging down into ideological discussions, and okay, the Maoists are doing what they believe in. Let them do. But we don't. We have to. We believe in the Constitution, right? What do we do? What is our constitutional efforts? Are we bringing people together? Are we bringing? I think I don't see a contradiction between Ambedkarites and Maoists. I see a complementarity. If you don't see this complementarity, then the Brahmanical rule will prevail. So that's where the politics of united front come into place. It's not that we don't. I mean, if you need another ism, I welcome it. If it is more humanized, is more sustainable, I welcome it. But we should, rather than fighting on the grounds of ideologies, I think it's a moment to come into celebrate a plurality of ideas and come to united front politics. That's where we need to identify the common enemies, the Hindutva Brahmanism, with the corporate backing. So I think that's where I come from.
Okay, thank you, Ashok.
Thank
So, Venkat, I believe, do you have any follow-up questions, or you are good?
Yeah, I mean, just a small comment. Yeah, see, I struggle with see. I mean, this is my view, and I'm a very critical view. Um, what happens is, we keep saying, how do we blame the state? I mean, states, right? And some of them, my friends used to say, "Oh, the repression has become very high." What do you expect from an enemy? What do you expect from a state? They will do everything in their power to suppress you. Okay? And that is the history. That is the human nature. That is the fight. So nobody is going to give a red carpet to you. The only way is you have to build. I mean, I'm not. This is again. I'm more philosophical. I don't want to blame individuals, okay, and I don't want to blame because it could be construed as as a what this great guy, that great guy was there, and all that. So there are a lot of great, but as a more at a very abstract, higher level, these movements could not achieve a transformative impact. Okay, that is what I would say. So the result is, especially Ashok, and I lived until probably you can relate to this, 84 in Jangam, which was a peak of student, like a communist, radical student union, and they were like running the entire state, okay, all universities, academicians, academic institutions. And then, of course, I went to Usmania University, 84, 88. Again, it was very peak. The result is when these movements are not strong and they started degenerating, I mean, they have become like a mafia gang. Some of them, these Naims of the world to, Paritala Ravi to, I can go on that today we have the RSU vice president when I was there was a leader. He's a big mafia called Raghava Reddy. Now he's in Congress. This other guy, what is that? Uh, anyway, so there are a lot of them. So the damage that caused when the movement is not strong and they degenerated, then these guys coming and killing common people, police and coming and common people. And it was a horrible place. I mean, we have witnessed, and the common people are the losers, sufferers. So that is the reason I want to completely. And then other thing is, there is always a state. There is a, we talked about all the negative connotations we can give. We, a state wants to preserve the power, status quo, dominant people, and all that, right? And the revolution that has to come, there is only a certain space. And unfortunately, that space is occupied in the last 70 years by communists. And people like us grew up not knowing Ambedkar until I came to, I mean, Ambedkar I know, no, but no ideological basis that, you could, transform a society. This is a way of fighting, way of, enlightening society. I never knew all that. And the reason is this communism occupied that space. Okay. And when it started, going out. Of course, now it's almost dead in Telangana, this. Then we started discovering Ambedkar, Phule, and all that. So just, I mean, we want to move beyond this to build a new, resistance, new way of organizing people, new way of fighting the state and the status quo. That is where, I would like to think, and we have to go as a, because India still, there was an article, India economy is growing, but 1 billion people are struggling to survive. Of course, there are 400 million people can create a very big economy, but 1 billion people are struggling to live. And we don't have to be in that state after 75 years of our.
Hey, Venkat, can you please wrap up?
Yeah. So that's where, I just, that's my last statement. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you. So I said that the Venkat's question will be the last one, but I see that Lalit has raised the hand, and I cannot deny the professor a chance to ask the question. So Lalit, please go ahead.
Oh, I really appreciate the presentation. I think we should have maybe more presentations on this topic. And recently, at Council on Social Work Education, we have around 4,000 professors meeting every year from US, and we have 4 main plenary speeches, and one of them was by Professor Bipin Jojo, who spoke on similar topic, what is happening in India around Adivasi issue. So I really appreciate the efforts, and we should have more of these presentations and more dialogue across communities, and more, I think, thoughts on what Venkat Moraju has shared, and others. Thank you.
Thank you very
Thanks.
much. Yeah.
I will reach out to you to get that a reference of the person you spoke, and we will try to get him also on the Boston Study Group lecture series. Okay, then thank you very much. I believe that is the end of this sessions. I just wanted to let you know that next session on 15th March, we are going to have Meena Kandaswamy and Kandaswamy. And please stay tuned for the notification on this one. So the Boston Study Group strives to engage in meaningful discussion that inspires positive change in our society. Whether you are a scholar, activist, student, or concerned citizens, your presence and participations are invaluable in furthering Dr. Ambedkar's vision of a more just, equitable, and inclusive world. On behalf of our group, I would like to extend our heartfelt gratitude for your participation in today's Ambedkar lecture series. We hope that the knowledge shared during the lecture has inspired you. If you have any questions or need additional information about the lecture series and also about the Awaken BSG Digital Magazine, please contact us at bostonstudygroup.com. We look forward to welcoming you to the future events. Please mark your calendar for upcoming event of Dr. B.R. Ambedkar birth anniversary celebration on 12th April 2025, if you are in the Boston area. And lastly, I would definitely like to thank once again to Ashok for his beautiful presentation. So thank you again, and see you in the next session.
Thank you very much.
Jai Bhim.